passing by reference. So, like I had mentioned, variables other than arrays and some other types are passed by value, which means that changes do not persist after that method exits. So let's go ahead and see an example of that. So let's go ahead and int my num, and I'm just going to set this to a static value. You could read it in doing console write line and read line, but I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and say, let's see, static void add num, and I'm going to take in a single variable, number, and I'm going to go ahead and say number plus equal number. So I'm just going to add that number to itself. And now I will say console.write line, and let's see, your number added to itself is number. All right, so a very simple method. Now all we need to do is just call it add num, my num. So we're just passing in our number, 42. We are adding it to itself, storing it back there, and then we're just printing out the value. So when we run this, this should print out 84. Your number added to itself is 84. If we call add num again, it's going to always print out 84, because even though we're changing the value of number here, once we exit out of this method, my num is still 42. My num is never 84 at that point. Sometimes it is useful to actually update my num. And you could do that a couple of ways. You could change this to an int, for instance. And then now when we do this, return number. And now every time that we call this, we just say my num is equal to that. And now this will update my num on each run. So we'll get 84 and then 168. So that is one way of doing it. But it's not the best for every situation. For numbers, it's really not that bad because a number is pretty small. It's 4 bytes in size. It has to allocate 4 bytes of space. It does something, and then it returns that and then stores it back in there. But if you have a larger object, let's say something which is 1 gigabyte in size, passing it by value means it has to copy 1 gigabyte worth of data to a new memory location, modify it, and then return that from the method, and then overwrite the changes at the original location. So instead, it would be nice, much like arrays, that if you pass in something, instead of creating a copy of it, it modifies it in place, and then it doesn't have to allocate new memory. So we can do this through this way. So let me go ahead and change these back. So now we're back to what we were before, and instead of returning, I'm just going to change this back to a void. And so this is what we were at before. So now notice that both of these will say number added to itself is 84. If we add in a new keyword called ref, ref says this variable is going to be passed by reference. It's still of type int. It does put this box around there, and it kind of breaks it up here. Notice it says argument is value while parameter is declared as ref. When you call this now, you have to explicitly say ref for each time you call it. It's just kind of a safety measure to tell you that, yes, I do know that I'm passing this by reference, as opposed to, well, is this reference or is this not reference? So now when we run this, notice that the only thing that I changed was adding ref to each of these. It does keep track of the changes from each iteration. And so going without the ref here, it is passed by value, which means that our answer is always going to be 84 because it's not modifying that variable in place. By just adding the ref keyword, oops, ref, with adding the ref keyword, now it does persist changes through each iteration. So notice we're getting 84 from the first iteration, from right there, and then we get 168 from the next iteration there. So that is a way that you can pass by reference to methods in C#. It's a little bit more typing than you would do in C++. C++, all you have to do is just put a ampersand there and then pass the variable in. Well, that's not a safe way of doing it because when you call add num, you don't necessarily know is that being passed by reference or value. So C# takes the idea that if you're going to pass by reference, you have to explicitly state that, yes, I know I am passing by reference this particular variable to the method which takes that variable in by reference.